A really dangerous thing is happening once again. Not surprising, but again, very dangerous. And I'll walk you through a few different examples of what I'm referring to. We'll start with a Senate candidate in Arizona, Kari Lake, who of course ran for governor and still hasn't conceded that race because this is the modern MAGA Republican Party. And here she is setting up, along with others that I'll show you, and of course along with Trump, right now already early, the claims of the election being stolen if Trump loses. And it is very hard these days, as we're going to walk through, for interviewers to get Republicans to just commit, okay, if Biden wins, will you accept it, or are you going to do this whole stolen election thing again? And it's very difficult to get a straight answer on that, because the answer is no, we will claim fraud. We will claim that it was stolen if Biden wins, which is not how democracy works. But here's Kari Lake perpetuating some of these claims, and then we'll move on to others.
Do you believe one of the motivations here is to get illegals, foreigners, to vote for the Democrats?
Oh, absolutely. 1,000%. Otherwise, they would be working hard to get the SAVE Act through, which will prevent that. Instead, in every state around the country, you're seeing Democrats fight tooth and nail any piece of legislation which will prevent illegals from voting, which will solidify and codify that already existent law. What they want, Maria, we're not going to see all these people pouring across the border showing up at polling places. What they want is to have a line in the voters' rolls so that somebody can vote for that person. And that's why they're asking them to register to vote when they get set up for Medicare and Medicaid, because they're giving them all of these services. Wow. They're asking them to sign up to vote. Then they have a line in the voter roll, and somebody will vote under that name.
So how confident are you then that we will have a fair election in November?
If it were today, I wouldn't be all that confident, but I know we have a lot of people, including myself, fighting to improve the laws and make sure they're following the laws. We've got many lawsuits running, one of them in Arizona.
Yeah. So then on to the lawsuits. And I've said before, we've been wondering, why is Kari Lake still bringing these lawsuits when she just keeps failing and losing? And some of her lawsuits are so ridiculous that her lawyers are sanctioned for the frivolous nature of these suits. Why does she keep doing this and setting herself up for failure when in a legal space she just keeps getting humiliated? Well, because then she can say stuff like that. And that sounds more official than the same argument without it, right? Where she can say things are being worked through the court. Now, they're being worked through the court into the courtroom trash can, but they're being worked through the court nevertheless. And thus, there's something legal, official going on that we're working on. When, of course, like I said, she just keeps failing with these lawsuits. But to go through some of what we just heard there, Maria Bartiromo said that Democrats are attempting to, or the question was about Democrats attempting to get foreigners or undocumented immigrants to vote. And that plays into then the response from Kari Lake, which is that's why we need the SAVE Act, this legislation that Mike Johnson and House Republicans are pushing for, that essentially serves to further the narrative that the status quo is not secure by trying to do something that's already done, implementing something into law that's already in law, which is that undocumented immigrants and non-citizens can't vote. That's already, we got that. Good. Non-citizens can't vote in elections, but they're trying to implement that again in this new legislation as a way of furthering the idea that right now that's happening. But when asked, how do you know that's happening? There's just these incoherent responses from the likes of Mike Johnson. In reality, it's not about actually making elections more secure, because again, the status quo is secure. The evidence reveals, as their investigations and their court cases keep confirming, but instead to give the official facade to the lies they've been telling about our elections, because we did something to fix what was broken previously, when what was broken was really only the fact that they've been lying about our elections. And then I've said before that if you want to make improvements to our election systems and you do want to make them quote unquote more secure, you could only have that outside of a movement that is dedicated to deteriorating our democracy, right? So if you can have good faith discussions about wanting reforms to our election systems, wanting to make things more convenient or more secure, whatever you'd like, but you have to start with the premise of honesty and based on the data about our elections, which is not that we have this widespread voter fraud that they use to justify some of these actions and statements. And then, funnily enough, she brought up undocumented immigrants, I guess, in her mind, are getting all these social programs and they're being treated so wonderfully. And while, of course, immigration law should be enforced and people should enter the United States legally, just as a matter of, again, data, the United States actually makes money off of undocumented immigrants because they tend to pay more into the system than they get out of it, because to get things out of certain programs would require them to reveal their citizenship status, and that's something many people don't want to do. So then we end up making money from the taxes they'll actually pay when they won't get the same services back that a citizen would, for obvious reasons. And so then the idea that they're sort of mooching off the system is just not an accurate point whatsoever. But it's not just Kari Lake spreading these falsehoods. You also have people like Lindsey Graham. By saying that he'll commit to the election if it's fair and if there's not massive fraud, it's as if we have dealt with that problem recently when we haven't.
Very quickly, Senator, before I let you go, a quick question about 2024. Will you accept the results of the 2024 election, no matter who wins?
Yeah, I'll accept it. But I think, if there's no massive cheating, I accepted 2020. Here's what I would say. President Trump is poised to win. He said,
and then he gets to that, and I'll show you a few more examples. By the way, when he said that in 2020 he accepted, he also was a part of the effort to overturn the Georgia election, and that caused a big kerfluffle. So he definitely wasn't always on board with the 2020 election results. Here you'll see a CNN segment where Van Jones makes a great point. Before it, though, they play a little compilation of Republicans not exactly fully committing to accepting the 2024 election.
I talked about potential running mates for Donald Trump, and this is to both of you, Van and Matt here, listen in, because they've been going on the Sunday shows basically dancing around the issue of accepting the election results in 2024. Listen to a little mishmash of non-answers to the question of will you accept the election results.
What about 2024? What about 2024?
We will see if this is a legal and valid election.
Just simply yes or no.
I expect President Trump to win the next election. Listen, I'm not going to answer your hypothetical question.
And certainly, if we have a free and fair election, I'll accept the results.
yeah, I'll accept it. But I think, if there's no massive cheating.
If you have state officials who are violating the election law in their states because of an emergency, without going through the legislative process, which is by our Constitution and by every law in our states, then no, I would not.
Whole lot of ifs and maybes there, Van.
Yeah, this is failing kindergarten when it comes to politics. Like, yes, you accept the election results, and you don't insult the integrity of the American democratic process, which is the envy of the world. It has been the envy of the world. There is no evidence of any significant cheating at all. 0.001%, and none of it affecting the outcome of the election. But these are the termites that you unleash into the foundation of a democracy that later on can come back and crash the whole house.
Yep, exactly right. And so it's all happening again. They're doing this whole charade again. And to us, it would seem so absurd and almost laughable if it weren't so dang serious. And if so many people don't think it's crazy, they think it's absolutely reasonable. And while, of course, if there were actual outcome determinative voter fraud, then yeah, that's obviously a caveat, which is that if in an election you actually had outcome determinative voter fraud, then people wouldn't accept it. But that's the problem. By saying that, the point they're trying to make is that that's a big risk when it's just not, as shown by the investigations commissioned by Trump's campaign not revealing such fraud, and the court cases and the recounts and the audits and the forensic audit by the cyber ninjas, the right-wing group. Just every single chance they had to prove these claims, they failed. And then they keep making them justify the fact that they just don't believe in democracy more than they believe in their own power. That's what it is. Because yes, sometimes you end up losing power, but you respect that outcome because you respect democracy more than just your own power. But that's what's happening. I think a lot of people in sort of the MAGA movement, some of the voters are bought into the lies So that's one problem. But some of the leaders, I think, genuinely just feel like their country is in a place ideologically that they're not going to be able to necessarily win, but their ambition for power has become more important, like I said. So their winning or losing in the democratic process has become irrelevant to if they think they should gain power. And that becomes a really dangerous situation where you have plots like what Trump engaged in after he lost in 2020 to prevent democracy from prevailing, which should be an issue that everyone can make their number one. We can't have any other policy discussion if our democracy falls apart, if the foundation, as Van Jones said there, crumbles. But a lot of people aren't putting that as their number one issue, and that is really, really unfortunate. If you want to watch another recent video, you can click there and let me know what you thought of that video by dropping a comment below.